Welcome to video 2, and no time to waste, let's get to work setting up our multiplayer system. Okay, I've started a brand new project, and well, let's go ahead and start setting it up. The first thing I'd like to do actually is to make a new folder, and I'm going to call that My Scenes, and inside of that I will save this scene as Menu. So let me put that there, Menu, good. Okay. Now, as part of my menu scene, I will just make it a little bit more interesting. I'll add a 3D object, a plane, and I'll just go ahead and increase the scale of that in X and Z. I always find it too bright, so I'm just going to make another folder, and I'm just call this My Materials. And inside of it, I will make a new material. And this material is called Gray. Now, by the way, my Unity version is Unity 2017.2. Okay, I'll just set that to gray and go ahead and apply that on. While I'm here setting up the scene, I'll also set up the lighting. Now, you always have these two both checked at the same time. You only use one or the other. And I'm going to use real-time lighting and set the light map parameters down to very low resolution. I won't use auto-generate. I will generate the lighting, and this will get the job done really fast, which is good while you're developing and you don't have your computer churning away in the background trying to process lighting. Okay. So with that done, next I'm going to make an empty game object here, and I'm going to call this the Network Manager. So Unity already supplies us components for that, though you won't use it in a game that you're going to publish. It's only for the initial prototyping would you use it, and those are the Network Manager and the Network Manager HUD. Now, for this Network Manager, you need to supply it with an offline scene and an online scene, and also the player prefab as well, in order for it to work. It's not going to work at the moment. So let's go ahead and do that sort of stuff. I've made sure to save my scene, and I'm just going to duplicate menu and just rename this Map 1. Okay, now go ahead and open up Map 1. Okay, good. Delete the Network Manager from that, because the Network Manager will transfer from the menu scene to Map 1, so you don't need a second one. And I need to just disable this main camera to avoid messages appearing that there's more than one listener, blah blah, that sort of stuff appearing. So I do assume that you've used Unity, you're familiar with Unity, and you have familiarity with coding in Unity as well. That's why I'm going pretty fast. Okay, so coming back, I'll just save that. Good. And coming back to the Network Manager, now in order to add these scenes there, I have to add them to the build settings first. So I'll just drag them in. Okay, good, done. And then here, my offline scene is menu, and my online scene is map 1. Now I need a character. So go ahead and import package, import the characters package, and just bring all of it in. Okay, so after importing it, there's going to be some warning messages here. Now this is just Unity stuff. This is the new version of Unity, and there's some code of theirs that they haven't updated yet. So just ignore it, and it's no problem. It'll be fixed up in a newer version. By the time you're probably using a newer version, you won't even see that. Okay, now I just went over to the prefabs in the first-person controller and brought in the FPS controller, break that prefab instance. Okay, and I'm going to make a new folder. And I'll call that My Prefabs. Okay. Now I'll just rename this as Player 1. And drop that into the My Prefabs folder. Now, this player is purely single player. The very first step to get it to become a multiplayer thing is to add a network transform component. By default, a network identity will also be attached because this component requires the network identity. Now, this player is controlled by our clients, our players, right? So you have to check local player authority so that the client can control this object. The server will spawn this player game object as something that that particular client can control. So you have to check that on. Next, the transform sync mode is currently on sync rigid body 3D. So just change that to sync character controller because that's what's on this, and that's the smoothest motion. You'll have the smoothest motion by syncing the character controller. Now the character is invisible, and yours will be, but just for the just for getting things going, I'm gonna just put in the third-person character, not the prefab, the model rather, the Ethan model. Just drag it onto the player there. Okay. Now the model's gonna be sitting too high, so it needs to come down to something like minus 0.9, perhaps, something like that. Might look okay. You look at the feet and yeah, roughly the feet might stick in the floor a little bit. Okay, whatever. It's good enough for our purpose. Okay, I'm just going to hit apply so I don't lose all these changes, and I can probably get rid of that from the scene and go back to the network manager. So in my prefabs, drag that player prefab on. Okay, good. Now going to the map 1 scene, currently both scenes look exactly the same, so I wouldn't be able to tell that I'd moved to the other scene. So let me just add some cubes to just make that really obvious. So when I spawn into the scene, I know that I spawned into the scene. Okay, good. And I can also do something else. You don't have to. Unity will just spawn the guy at some default location, which I think is at the origin. You can make spawn points, and they are network start position. So network start position. And now we'll make better use of these later. Not right now, not in this video. And I'll just call this a spawn point. And you can just make a bunch of them. You can make more of them, of course. So I'm gonna just do that. Just make one over here. Make another one over there. I probably should turn them as well, so that they face somewhere. Well, towards each other anyway. Okay, whatever. I'm wasting too much time on that sort of stuff. Now going back to the menu. So just save that. You can change the spawn method. You can have round robin or random. I'll just leave it at random. Okay. So that should do. Let me just quickly run the game. Just check that the most basic stuff is working. LAN host. Okay, all good. That's very nice. That is working. Okay. Let me build that. And I'll just make a folder here called built. And I'll just call this built. Okay, so there is going to be a problem, by the way. So let me just hit play here. It won't be obvious at first. You won't understand straight away, or if you've already been doing a bit of multiplayer stuff, you will understand straight away. But let me just jump in. So here's the host. The host is in, right? You can see him in the scene. Okay, whatever. He's looking through his camera, and he's able to control his player as expected. We'll add an animation shortly in this video. But anyway, so okay, that's good. Let me go over to this one and join as a client. All right. So the client's in, and something's not right. The camera is totally messed up. So, yeah, okay. So if you look in the editor, now why is that camera moving? Why is that one? Well, that cat shouldn't be moving, right? Well, what's happening is, basically, the camera on this one has gotten confused. The script there has gotten confused, and it's using another camera. It's using the camera on the latest spawn player and looking through that. So as the motion is getting synced correctly. So the motion of the characters are getting synced correctly because of the network transform component. But the cameras are getting messed up, and well, we need to actually make sure that certain scripts on the players are only active on the player that's controlling them. So if like, you know, this is the editor, this is their player, you can see that in the scene. I was just jumping there. Okay, this like first person controller, it needs to be active on this player. But now this other one, this is the client's game object. Now on this one, it should really be disabled. This is what's causing the camera getting messed up. So because the script is active on both, they're both running, and every single player that gets added, they'll all be running, and it's just not going to work like that. So you've got to control what is running on what game object, basically. So your local player has everything running, and then your client players in this scene, in this particular scene, won't have their stuff running. And in the other way over here, for this guy, this is his local player, so you make sure his stuff is running, and you switch off the other stuff on the other player game objects that are not his. Okay, so we're going to do that right now. We're going to write a bit of code to make that happen. So I'm going to make a new folder, and I'm going to call this My Scripts. And inside of it, I'll make a new C# script and call it player_network. And go ahead and open that up. Okay, so this is our very first script, and we have to add in 2 more using statements. So using Unity engine.networking and using Unity standard assets.characters.firstperson. And this is going to be a networked script, so it isn't going to derive from mono behavior, rather it will derive from network behavior. Now we can access the multiplayer library. Next I'll have my variables. So the first one is public game object first person character. So the first person character on our prefab is this one, the one that has the camera on it. So we're going to actually control whether this is enabled or not. And next here is public game object character model. So I don't want the character model on the player game object that we're controlling to be active. I want it to be typically disabled. Otherwise, yeah, you can see them. You can see through the arms or the legs or whatever, and it looks weird. So I'm going to just take care of that. I don't need the start and update methods, but I do need this Unity method, which is public override void on start local player. So this is what's called when the multiplayer game object starts up. So yep, just delete the base on start local player instruction there. And I should explain that this method is only going to run on the player game object that belongs to that particular client. All of the other player game objects that are spawned into the scene that are other clients that we can't control in our game, they won't have this method run on them. Okay, so the first instruction I'll have here is get component first person controller dot enabled is equal to true. So since I'm doing that here, just so I remember, I'm going to actually disable the first person controller on the prefab. So go ahead, make sure you do that. Okay, coming back. My next line is first person character dot set active true. So I'm going to activate this game object on the player character that I control. So go over to the player character again, to the first person character, and disable this child game object. So make sure to do that. Okay, next I have a for each loop. So for each game object geo in character model, so in this array character model, go.setActive false. So this is going to disable the Ethan model basically. Okay, so save that. That's it. That's the script. It's pretty simple. So going back to the player, let's add that onto our player prefab. I'll just drag it in. It's a bit easier. Well, for me anyway. So player network. Okay, so I've got that attached there. And let me just drag on the first person character. There we go. And the character model. Okay, so currently the size is 0. So all of these bits make up the character model. Except for the skeleton rather. So the Ethan body and the Ethan glasses, they both make up that part of the character. So I'll just lock this to make it easy for me. And then just drag these into the character model array there. Okay, good. So that is sorted. I'll unlock that and make sure to hit apply. Good. Okay, get rid of that and save this, and let's go ahead and build and run. Okay, I'll start a host. Good. Let's jump in here and join as a client. All right, good. Okay, it's working. It's definitely working now. So I'm actually controlling the player I'm supposed to control. In the editor, you can see that my player is invisible. the one that I'm controlling in the editor. That's our local player object in this game. Okay, and the other player is over there, so let me just switch over to him. And okay, and you can see that he's being controlled only in this game, and he's being correctly synced in the other scene. So perfect, our thing is working. Okay, good. Enough of that. No time to celebrate. Yeah, you just saw me there getting really bothered by the cursor there in the editor. So that's the next thing. I want to make a script just for the sake of making life easier for myself. It's called player_toggle cursor. And so I have a really basic way of taking care of that, a very crude way, but works. Okay, so in the using area, we have using Unity standard assets, .characters, .first person, and using Unity engine .networking. And once again, this is going to be a network behavior. Okay, so I'm going to make my own method here, and this is called void toggle cursor. And I'll just add in that variable in just a moment. Well, actually, I'll just do that now since it's showing up as red. And it's just public first person controller FPS controller. And so I'll put that in the inspector. And then FPS controller inside the void toggle cursor method, FPS controller dot enabled is equal to not FPS controller dot enabled. So just swap it whenever toggle, just swap its current active status. Now I don't need a start method. I'll delete that. But I do need the update method. Now I only want this script to run on the local player, the one that we control in our game. So I do this check here. It's if not is local player, return. So get out of this method if this is not the local player. If it is the local player, that means we should be able to toggle the cursor. So I'll put in here then, if input.get button up, and you have to write it exactly like this. It should be like that in your input manager. So edit project settings, input, and you should have a button there called cancel, which is your escape button basically. Okay, so if input.get button up, cancel, toggle cursor, run that method. Okay, good. So we go ahead and make sure to attach that onto our prefab. Okay, and add that toggle cursor and add the FPS controller. Now that's easy. That's easy. Okay, done. And just make sure to apply that. Apply. Good. And delete that from the scene. Okay, let me go ahead and just give it a quick try. Okay, good. Okay, very good. There we go. See, that's all I wanted to do, just to make life easier. Now I can actually freeze it and see what's happening through the player's eyes in the editor or whatever. Okay, good. So let me just exit out of that. Okay, next I'd like to have some animations as well. So I'm just, well, it's going to be one animation, but I'm just going to put in there my controller for the animation controller. And I'm going to just make a new character controller, an animator controller rather, and just call this player. Okay, so inside of that, we'll just open that up and create a new state. Just will be called idle. And there are animations already coming with the standard assets. And all I want is the humanoid idle. Okay, good. Okay, my next state is going to be run. So just basically moving, running. So just call that run. Okay. And for this one, the motion, I just want a humanoid run. So yeah, that should do just fine. Okay, so I do want a parameter here for my animator, and it's going to be a Boolean. I'm going to call it moving, okay? And just set up a transition from idle to run, and the condition here is going to be that moving is true. Good. Okay, as for this business of exit time, I'll turn that off, and I'll also just set the transition duration like I'll set it way down to like 0.1 and just move this here. Just get it over here, otherwise it'll look weird. Okay, good. And we need a state back as well, of course. Good. So edit that as well. Give it a condition, which is moving is false. Okay. Take away the exit time and the duration. Let's make it like 0.1 really short, so it doesn't waste any time doing that, and push it there. Okay, good. So that's our animator controller. So coming back to the player prefab, just drop it in. We'll get rid of it later. So the animator, just bring that in. Attach an animator component. For this one, the avatar is going to be the Ethan avatar. And as for the controller itself, it's going to be player, okay? And I'm not going to apply root motion. Okay, so that's good for that. And we need another component. So we need the network animator component. Okay, it needs to know what is that animator, so just drag that in. And yes, we want to sync the moving parameter, so check that. But now we're not going to be able to do anything just yet. We must write a script for the animation business anyway, even single player. So I've just applied that. Just get rid of it for now, and just make a new script. And this new script is going to be called player_animation. So go ahead and open it up. Okay, so I must have using Unity engine.networking, and of course change this to a network behavior. My variable will be public animator player animator. I will use the update method, but not the start method. And before getting to the update method, I have to write my own method. So void check for player input. I only want this script to run on the local player game object. All the other game objects, the other players in my game, they should be disabled. Only the one that I control. So once again, if not is local player, return. Okay, now I want to check for input. If there's any input, the moving boolean should be set to true. So what I'm going to say is that if mathf.abs, absolute value, input.getAccess vertical, as you know, that's in the input manager, which I just showed you earlier, vertical is greater than 0, or mathf.abs input.getAccess horizontal is greater than 0. So that's saying if I'm pressing the W or S keys or the A and D keys, then obviously then the value will be greater than 0. And if that's the case, then player animator.setBool is moving to true. Oh, so the name there is moving, so that's what it has to be, exactly match, otherwise it's not going to work. And we need something to disable that as well, to set it to false. So else player animator.setBool moving false, and that will stop the animation. Okay, so let me just save that, and we need to just call that method here in update. Okay, so going back to Unity, let's go ahead and attach that to the player. Add component, there we go, player animation, and it needs the animator component. Okay, good. Alright, so I'll just save that, and just quickly, just to check that I've done it right, just jump in. Oh yeah, obviously I can't see, how silly. Now let me just build that. Okay, so let me just host a game here. Good. Come back to this one. Join in as a client. Very good. And there we can go. If you look into the screen on the bottom left, you can see that the other client is animating across the network. Perfect. Okay, but we can't see that here because, well, yeah, I can't have the other window open at the same time. Well, you just saw the jump there, but that was just the position getting updated. So let me just bring that in. Good. All right, so that's very good. Our animation is being synced across the network. Now, before I just finish up with this video, I did want to just show you about matchmaking. So you see the option there. Now that's the way to host public games and be able to have people connect to you without any connectivity issues. So to do that, to set it up, you need to bring up your services tab and then go to the multiplayer button down here, and you will basically set it up. You'll set up an account ID, and then you need to go to the dashboard, which is a web page, and then input the number of rooms, basically the number of players rather per room, that sort of thing. So you can see that there. Okay, so that's basically that. And once you've done that, once it's set up for this title, for this game, then you can actually use it. So I'll just show that to you in just a moment. Okay, so let me enable the matchmaker here. I'll just leave it as default room name. Create that internet match. Okay, I'm in. Good. Let me jump in here. Enable matchmaker. Find internet match. There we go. Join match default. And yep, we're in as well. Good. So that's all working, and this is actually a public game. So if you went and gave this to somebody who's not in your network at all, they would be able to connect to your game. And it's using Unity's matchmaking service and their relay server. So obviously, once you go beyond the free limit, then they do start charging. Now, there are third-party assets that are out there to try and minimize the amount that you spend by taking better advantage of direct connections and stuff, but those are some of the options that are out there. But really, if you're having a very large game, then and with lots and lots of players, then in that sense that you will probably be quite successful enough to be able to cover the cost of the multiplayer side of things. Okay, so that is pretty much it. Now, of course, we're not going to, in this series, utilize this default UI. So you will see later on how to create a custom network manager and your own UI so that you are in a better position for when you release your game, that you're not relying on that stuff. You obviously can't have that UI in a game that you release, even if it's just an early alpha. It just doesn't look right at all. But anyway, once you know how to build your custom network manager, you'll be able to easily make any UI you want. Okay, so I've talked enough. That's really quite enough for this video. So thanks for watching, and you'll see me in the next video.